Good evening. Welcome to Ask the Mayor. I'm Kurt Morris, the Mayor of San Dimas. To my right is Blaine Michaelis, the City Manager of San Dimas. And the purpose of our program is to give you an opportunity to talk to us, tell us what might be on your mind, or ask any questions you might like to ask. We do have a few things to talk to you about, but please interrupt because our primary purpose is to take calls from you and talk about the things you want us to talk about. Blaine?
Well, it's great to be here. It feels like fall weather a little more and more. And maybe we'll get some rain next week, which would be a nice thing. I think as we kind of begin the show tonight, we have kind of a somber news to share with the viewers, and many may have heard, but Diana Bertone, the wife of Dennis Bertone, passed away this week. We miss her, we recognize her life, and express our feelings to Dennis and all that this means to him. It means the same to us too, a great loss. But Diana was a wonderful person, involved in so many community things, volunteer in many organizations, and just so highly regarded and well thought of, a very kind and thoughtful person. She was a social worker for 35 years and a San Dimas resident since 1975 when she and Dennis first moved here. But we acknowledge her life and we share our feelings to Dennis, and as we kind of share this difficulty with him. He's an important part of our city council and our city family and team, so we recognize that.
We certainly do. And you know, when people, I've talked to a number of people since she died, and everybody says the same thing.
Yeah.
She was such a nice person.
Right.
And just everybody liked Diana, and she had a great life.
Yeah. Wonderful person. It's kind of a tougher week too. Bill Emerson, his services were earlier this week, and Bill's longtime volunteer and good guy. He had a way of saying things clearly, but
Yes.
What a devoted soul.
Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Mayor Morris and Blaine. I have a question. I think they're going to be mostly for Blaine. Blaine, I emailed you a while back and requested information about the area just south of the San Dimas Retirement Center, right off of Valley Center, because I thought it was a great fire hazard, and I had not heard anything. If you addressed it, I missed it on another show.
Sure, let me give you an update on that. I did contact the fire department. They have an inspection team that deals with overgrowth in residential areas, and so they dispatched their crew to go and do an inspection of that area that you had mentioned in the email, and then notified the residents that there was some overgrowth material that needed to be removed to make it more fire safe, and so they will follow through, and probably have by now. This was maybe 6 to 7 weeks ago, and so they followed through, those property owners, to have those plants cut back or removed in an effort to address the fire concern that develops from the vegetation in that area. So I know that they contacted them because we received some phone calls from the residents who were visited by the inspectors wondering why they were having to do this, and it was an easy explanation that it's for the safety of not only their property but for that area and the community of San Dimas. And so that's what happened. The fire department did respond and notify the folks, and are following through to make sure that that material has been removed.
I was not aware that it was their responsibility. I thought it belonged to someone else, a county facility.
Actually, it's private property is the way that those are set up. In other words, those lots go down into the creek channel, And so it's all private property, and so it would be a private property responsibility to address that.
Okay. I have one other question about the Gold Line. I'm perplexed as to why they can't use one of the existing rail lines without having to lay down new track.
The corridor that they have to use only has one track in it now, and it's used for freight. And so a light rail system uses two tracks regularly, and it's a different setup. The track size, the width of the rails, it's electrified. It runs by electricity instead of diesel. And so for them to fit 3 tracks in the right-of-way, they need to move things around. So they'll be moving the freight to the north and then building 2 new lines that are needed for the back and forth use of the light rail system. So, does that?
Okay, so they're going to run next to each other, but they can't use the same line.
Yeah, because the trains will be going on opposite directions all the time, and so sharing one line would not be, they wouldn't be able to have the capacity to move people unless they had 2 tracks, one going west and one going east.
That freight train, I only see usually about 1 train a day. Is there no way of moving the freight trains that use that line somewhere, route it to another track?
The freight on that freight line, there are 2 or 3 customers that are served by the railroad. And I think the end of the line customer is the brewery that's on the 210 freeway near Irwindale. And so that, to maintain and service their customers, they own the right to use that right-of-way. And that is a one-track system because they go down, as you point out, they go down one way, they deliver to their customers, and then they pick up from their customers and then go return back by going east. So, but they do have the right to be able to use that right-of-way for that service. There had been some thought to simply talk them into working out where they would use trucks instead of rail cars, to service that facility. Then there wouldn't be the need for the rail right-of-way, but that had already been explored and determined to be infeasible, and that the railroad was not willing to give up their right-of-way to use that track area to be able to service their customers. So the Gold Line actually has to pay for the moving of that line to get it further to the north, so there's enough room for the 2 Gold Line tracks. So that is part of the major expense, actually, of the Gold Line project, because it only goes to Irwindale. And so it's a cost burden for our part of the track. So the other parts of the Gold Line did not have to move that freight line. So,
just what we would have needed is some more trucks on the 210 freeway.
Well, maybe that's the argument for having the train continue to serve that customer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for the answer.
Thank you for calling. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Goodbye.
We were mentioning just briefly about the services earlier this week, and recognizing Bill Emerson and his contributions, and my goodness, Jerry Ennis, also a long time city person that ran San Dimas Community News for a long time. Great souls, just have done many things for the community, and we recognize them and honor them as well.
I think it's the sign of the times. We know people who are getting older.
Right, that
Not us, of course.
does happen, I guess.
At least not you. Well, we do have news about the Gold Line, and since
We do.
we just talked about it a little bit, maybe you'd like to tell us the latest and maybe greatest, or maybe not so great.
Boy, do we have news. They've been going through the bidding process, and they had 4 contractors. They were bidding to build the line from Glendora to Montclair. So the budget for that had been set at $1.7 billion to construct the line. The 4 bidders submitted their bids in September, and they started to go through the numbers and the proposals themselves, because it's a design-build contract. In other words, they will finish the design and then construct the rail project. So the bids came in a little bit higher, well, a lot higher than anticipated. Two of the bidders were high, but they were kind of the lower, and then the other two were much higher than the other two. So they've dismissed the top two, and they're focusing on the bottom two contractors. And the reason why the bids came in higher than anticipated is because there's a lot of economic uncertainty. For example, this is an 8-year project. What's the price of steel going to be in 6 months or 6 years? So if you don't know exactly what the steel price is, you may add some numbers to the bid, because when you need steel, you're going to have to buy it. And if the price is higher in the future, you got to give yourself some financial room to accommodate a price increase. So there's many of the materials that are involved in the project that may be subject to economic uncertainty, price of oil, international tariffs, trade. All of these things are uncertainties, and also the labor supply. The unemployment rate in our area in the United States is the lowest it's been in a long time. So you need to hire employees to build this project. What would the labor supply be, the skilled labor, to be able to build a project over time? So when you look at these uncertainties, the way you address them is to add money to your bid, because you're going to have to cover all those costs, whatever they may be, to build the project. You don't get any more money in year 6 if steel price doubles. So what that did is that it added cost to the project to the point where they've decided to only build the Gold Line extension from Glendora to Laverne. In other words, it would be in Glendora, San Dimas, and Laverne. And Laverne would be the new terminus station for this phase of the Gold Line. In other words, they would make that, maybe add more parking to the terminus station, but they're calling it the temporary terminus because they've also set their budget to add $570 million to the budget to then take it from Laverne to Montclair. They don't have the $570 million today, so they would have to work on obtaining that $570 million as soon as they could get it. So that's the facts, and that's the bad news. I guess the good news, as the Gold Line is explaining, is if they're only going to build 3 stations, it's going to take them less time to do this part of the project. So instead of being finished in 2026, they would be able to be to Laverne in 2024, so 2 years earlier. And then, but unless they can come up with $570 million, then the Laverne station may be the end station for the line. They prefer not to, but they will need to get $570 million from a very competitive transit funding source to be able to get that money from other projects that are probably going to be experiencing the same cost issues.
One of the things that is kind of interesting is they also pointed out the cost to build it from Laverne to even to Claremont, and particularly on to Montclair, is they have to deal not only with the freight railroad, but they also have to deal with Metrolink.
Yes.
All sharing a right-of-way.
Right.
And that's not easy.
Right.
So I think by the time that the Gold Line is finally finished, we'll be thinking it was made of gold based on the price.
Well, I think San Dimas is watching this very carefully, because I know Laverne is in particular. The distance between the San Dimas station and the Laverne station is less than 2 miles. And so they're having to go, because they're redesigning the project, they're going to go through a study to look at the impacts of having Laverne be the new terminus station. And in other words, what are the impacts and what are the solutions to having Laverne be the end of the line? So Laverne is going to be very careful to make sure that they do a clear analysis of Well, if we're the end of the line, people will drive to our city to get on the line. Or maybe they'll come from the Metrolink line and want to get onto the Gold Line. And so the transportation, the parking needs, the demand, the parking needs to be sufficient. And so on our side, we want it to be sufficient too, because if there's not enough parking in Laverne, you drive the 2 miles to San Dimas. And then we want to make sure our parking is sufficient, because if it's not sufficient, then either they'll continue driving to Glendora, or they'll start to park on the side streets and other areas that are not provided for parking for the Gold Line. So we have a very strong interest in making sure that the impacts of the terminus station are well addressed, and that we are part of this solution, and that they address those issues completely. Excuse me.
It's a complicated matter. My preference would have been that it ended in Glendora, because it's just hard to imagine any way to reduce the impact of what is essentially a wall that's substantially higher than the Berlin Wall was.
Right.
That's going to go right through the middle of San Dimas.
Right.
We got the short straw or the long straw, whichever is the loser on that one.
But it is a big change, and so the timing on all this is they're going to start to do the environmental work to evaluate the impacts of the new design starting very soon. They want to finish that by April of 2019. That's kind of ambitious.
Yes.
And then they would like to negotiate with one of the 2 bidders and come up with an agreement with them that would allow them to start their work in May of 2019. It will take a year for them to finish the design of the project, the contractor. So there won't be construction immediately. And so when they start in May, it's just to finish the design and start to ordering the materials and to start the construction probably in 2020, maybe the middle of 2020. And then the construction would take place 2 or 3 years. Then there's the fine tuning of the project, so that by 2024, that would be the goal, that when this segment would be finished.
Where are we on our negotiations regarding the bridge that will pass over the intersection of Cataract and Bonita Avenue?
The city communicated to the Gold Line that because of the impact of the bridge over Bonita Cataract, and as you say, the wall, it could be at its peak 32 feet high, and then it kind of tapers, but not very fast. So all that you will see on that bridge will be this 30 to 32 foot wall, and then there's a railing, and then there's the gantry on top of that. So the city said this is a big impact for our community. It cuts right through our downtown, through our community, and so we would like to have some enhancements to the design of the bridge. And to make it wide so that it's doesn't block as much of the city. So they've agreed to put together, and we gave them some suggestions on what those architectural things could be like, and they agreed to address them. So in the first review of those plans, they weren't quite what we thought we had agreed upon. And
Surprise,
the Gold Line has agreed to continue discussions with us. Basically what we put on paper is an arch design, a trellis system that would make the bridge have a little more character than simply a concrete bridge. And then to have some architectural treatments to the abutments and the columns, so that they, for example, a brick, cladded column or abutment, so that it has a better design to it. I mean, we're going to be looking at it for a long time. And so, but putting these trellises on the bridge will make it, just take the edge off of it and give it a little more architecture. And so the debate has been the scale of that. I mean, the center span is 175 feet. And so it needs to be a scale that will cover and make that be a meaningful, architectural element. So it was a little flat and a little short from what they gave us. But they did agree to continue meeting with us. And we're confident that we'll just continue to work with them to have an architectural side to the bridge that will help. The thing that, so we're working on that, and we've got good direction. We're hoping that we can achieve that. The other thing that's kind of been put off to the side is San Dimas's parking for the project. They wanted to deal with that separately, and that what they would like to do would be to use the property near the corporation yard and the city corporation yard to give us another place to have the corporation yard. This will be on Walnut, just north of Arrow Highway on the west side. And so they've kind of set that aside while they've been working on the main construction. So now they'll have to start to work on that sooner and to work with us. And that the issues there are how many parking spaces are required so that they can adequately park those who'll be using the Gold Line. And as we know, they've been charging for parking. We've noticed that that affects the use of the parking. Some people just don't, they'd rather park somewhere else and pay $3. And so where is the somewhere else? If it's on some of the adjoining properties or in our municipal parking lot, that's not an acceptable alternative.
And have serious parking enforcement
right.
issues possible.
So that issue will now come front and center, probably also in the first quarter of 2019, so that the final decisions on the parking need to be made within the next 6 to 8 months. So
okay.
a big change, and
this may not be the last change.
Right.
Somehow I have the feeling.
I think overall, and I guess I don't want to speculate a lot, but there's a lot of rail projects that are being proposed from Major M. This is the first one that's kind of gotten to the point of a bid. So it's a very ambitious program. I mean, there's rail to be built all over Los Angeles County. So if you're trying to get another $570 million to finish just this segment, to go 3 more stations, that may be a real uphill situation for them, for the Gold Line. So this could be the alignment, the configuration of the Gold Line for a long time. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I think there are many potential rail projects that are not even thought of, where the population density and the potential ridership so much greater than it is on the Gold Line that I can see there'll be a lot of competition for that money.
Yeah, and how competitive are we? Not very, compared to some of the others. So that's why I think we need to pay attention to this to the point where we maybe realize that this could be the complete alignment. So we need to look at these impacts very carefully.
Well, Blaine, I think we'll have more to follow sometime on this, particularly since they have another EIR to go through for the parking and all of the things that go with that. But we have a few other things going on in San Dimas also, as I recall.
As we begin with that, I wanted to make mention, because it's fresh on everyone's mind, the fires that have been kind of devastating our area. And I think it might be, if you're aware of what's been happening, you've seen what's been going on television, and you've seen perhaps even the personal impact that a major disaster can have on a family, on your circumstance, it may be a good time for us to just talk a little bit about our situation and what we may want to encourage ourselves to be prepared for, because we have Santa Ana winds here too. And we have hillsides, and we have, the potential for fire. And so I think some of the things that we would encourage people to look at is be very careful about looking at your own situation in your home. Identify an evacuation plan. Identify emergency preparedness. Because in many cases, like up north in Northern California is even worse. People had no time. You were basically running for your life. It wasn't a matter of prepare yourself, you're going to be evacuated soon. It was try and get out of the way. And down here, there was some evacuation time or notice of evacuation. But it's well for us to think of, if we needed to leave, what would we do? And to almost kind of prepare for that, so that it's kind of like a drill that you might do in your household to say, what would we take? Are all of our materials and our medicines and our papers in one place? Or could we grab them quickly? What would we need? And And just things like that, so that allows you that when it is time to leave, you can leave. And I hope we've all noticed the importance of leaving an evacuated area.
Yeah, I think that I watched and heard interviews with some of the fire people that these fires are moving so fast that staying is not an option.
Right.
Even though in here we had the experience, our city attorney who lives in Calabasas, was out of his home from Thursday to Tuesday,
Right.
I think. Did not destroy his home, but he came to work dressed rather casually for the city council meeting Tuesday night because that's what he had to wear. But a lot of people, like in the northern part, they were talking about because their prior experience, they thought they were pretty well prepared, and they, to the extent of having the things that you need to take with you,
Yeah.
the medicine supplies, things like that, in bags that were in a place that they could just grab that. They wouldn't have to put it together. And that, sometimes they didn't have a tough time even to get that.
Yeah.
That it was moving so quickly. And then those cars that people were driving down the road and got caught up in their cars and there was no place to go.
Well, you could see that during the fire itself, the firefighters are right in the middle of it. So they have their engines going down the streets trying to protect or stop a particular advance of fire or protect a home. If there were cars, your cars that were there in the driveway, or your cars on the street, or you're running around, trying to deal with your own property. So having that space clear so that the emergency personnel and the equipment can move quickly to where it needs to go, or have access to where they need to be. If it's cluttered with people and vehicles, it makes it very, very difficult, or too difficult. More difficult it needs to be.
And the difference in those fires with high winds and no wind, we saw when we had the fires that were just north of Terrebonne, because the night that they got closest to the houses, the fire got closest to the houses, there was no wind at all.
Oh boy.
And that makes a huge difference. You go over, even the sound of the fire.
Yeah.
Because I was out going around with a watch sergeant, and went around a couple of places, and there was a place around up toward the canyon a little bit where the wind was blowing a little bit, and the sound it is noisy when there's a big fire. And where the fire, it's not real quiet, even in the best of circumstances, but in the areas where the wind wasn't blowing, the intensity is so different.
Yeah.
And the distance away from the flames that you really feel the heat.
Yeah.
We were kind of up in the canyon a little ways, and we were on the road, and the fire was burning over north of the golf course, and it was, there's a stream, there's a canyon, everything, and it was really hot. Whereas over on Terrebonne, if you were a third of the distance from the fire, you could stand to be there, and the difference was the wind.
Wow.
So it's big, and then those flying embers fly a long way when the wind's blowing hard. It's very scary.
The other thing that we kind of have learned a bit is, be prepared to be able to evacuate for sure, and all the things that you would need, but a place to go. There will be shelters set up, but on the other hand, if it's going to be multiple days, if there's a relative in an adjacent city or a city a little ways away, it really makes for a much more comfortable evacuation. So, or a friend. So kind of prearranged evacuation destinations is not a bad idea, because these could be multiple days when you'll be out. We'll do our best to have shelter operations, but on the other hand, if there's a lot of people or it's an extended period of time, staying with someone else may be a good option.
And we have some areas that we're rural, and there are areas that there's fuel to burn. Not as much as in some places, but it can be a challenge.
Also, one thing we heard just today, some of the reports, not everyone had maintained their fire insurance on their property. And boy, that's when a disaster turns into an incredible loss. So it's not a bad idea to look at the paperwork and maintain your insurances appropriately, whether you're a renter or an owner, because all of your belongings are subject to loss. So
Yep.
keeping your insurance up to date. And
I think renters are probably more susceptible to not having insurance than the homeowners, because if you have a mortgage, the mortgage company is going to make sure
right,
you have, because if you don't buy it, they'll buy it and charge you for it. But with the renters, renters are frequently when the fire. The other thing that happens is that if you're a homeowner, you get some built into your fire insurance policy is some money for you to live
right.
while the house is repaired or rebuilt. Renters, if you don't have an insurance policy that covers your contents and covers that risk, which is worth considering having. I don't sell insurance, but that's worth looking at, because it is. These are huge losses because of, again, when we come back, it's like the gold line being more expensive because there's labor. The unemployment rate is so low. There are not a lot of people available to rebuild all the houses and to rebuild all the infrastructure.
I took a feeling about it because of the city background. Paradise, California, 7,000 homes are destroyed. That's 3/4, 4/5 of the entire town.
And the high school,
Yeah,
the hospital,
right.
and there's somebody that there was of course the news covers everything now, but the sense of total loss for the students. What do?
I know.
They don't have a home. They don't have the school where they went, and when will they have either of those?
Right.
Again, it's
What does the city do? I mean, there's probably its infrastructure, its city facilities are gone too, and you have a police and fire department and services, but there's no one. All the homes are gone.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. Just incredible.
The other thing, when we had the fire that burned all of our foothills, there were, by each house, there were a couple of fire trucks
Right.
of the ones exposed, and they were from all over the state.
Yeah.
Now, there are no fire trucks available. There's a lot of cooperation between fire departments, and that all works, and it's well coordinated throughout the state. But when the fires are burning at both ends of the state,
Yeah.
they're just, all of the equipment is in use. The airplanes and helicopters, and
Right.
it's very difficult. I mean, I think it's almost unprecedented that we have been involved with fires this size that are this serious and moving this fast for maybe ever.
Yeah. So I guess the encouragement tonight is for everyone to watch this from a personal perspective. As you see things unfold on television, and now we kind of watch people as they discover what happened and how these people recover, is to listen to their stories about preparation and doing the small things that allow you some confidence that if something like this starts to come our way, your way, that you have some preparation. It will give you some peace of mind, but could be a great importance for you and your family. So
Very much so, and the things like food, water,
right.
very important.
Well, and some disasters are all different. I mean, an earthquake may disrupt your home, may disrupt a lot of homes, and so sheltering in place, may be your best option. You don't really have to leave, but being able to sustain yourself for a while, because the utilities will be out. Your house may be perfectly fine, but you have no water or electricity or no gas and no sanitary sewer. So there's other disasters to kind of give thought to and prepare for that would be long-term, drawn-out circumstances, and the more prepared you are, the more you'll be able to weather all of that. So, but wow, what a week.
We have disaster kinds of plans and things to try to keep the city operating as well as we could. That's assuming our employees can get here if there's that kind of an emergency. But I think we all need to take the personal responsibility that we're going to have to take care of ourselves for a while. Because even though there are a lot of volunteers, a lot of professionals, on a real emergency, there's not enough. So people have to rely on themselves primarily, and maybe even be hopefully able to help some other people too.
You know, I share this, and some people kind of think it's just a soft number, but the day of an earthquake, and it made everything stand still, San Dimas would need 100,000 meals just that day to feed the San Dimas residents. So if it was 2 days, you need 200,000 meals to feed San Dimas for 2 days. So there's not a kitchen that can produce 100,000 meals a day.
And then there are the people in Glendora and Laverne
Right.
and that want to be fed too.
So then on the other hand, if you prepare and you have food and water and you can go 2 weeks, then that's really the way that you're going to have your needs, your sustenance taken care of, is by your own planning. Because there's not a kitchen that's going to produce 100,000 meals a day. So, the other things, boy, we're just really getting a disaster show tonight. We wanted to give folks an update on a couple of street projects. The one that's going on right now that's probably the most visible is San Dimas Avenue. This is from kind of Via Figueroa heading south to Villa Verde. So it's been quite a project. We appreciate the public's patience. We are restructuring that street. We did a lot of paving today, and when we told people that we're going to keep the street open, we are. 2 lanes are always open, but we need to remember that one of those lanes is needed for the trucks that are bringing in the asphalt and everything. So, and sometimes we need to guide the traffic through. So we're using pilot vehicles to escort, and so you may have to wait at one end of that escort for us to be able to move you through the construction area. But it's pretty hard to repair a street and keep it open at the same time. And so, but we're doing our best, and if folks have a little more patience, by the middle of December, we'll have the entire project completed, which is a lot of work to be done in a short period of time. And so we want folks to know that when we're finished, it will not only include rebuilding the street, but also the trailhead at Mike Antonovich Trail, there at the bend on San Dimas Avenue, will be completely redone. More parking will be available. And so that'll be a nice amenity, as well as we're not going to be needing to have maintenance on that street for some time. So have patience, folks, we're almost there. The other kind of quiet project has been building the new alignment for Golden Hills Road. Now I'll tell you, that project's gone very well because we haven't had to detour traffic. It's been closed since 2010. But we're just about, it's paved, we'll be doing the striping, and we anticipate opening it actually before Thanksgiving next week. So keep an eye on it, or we'll let you know when it's open, but our plan is to open it before Thanksgiving next week, and then that'll be a new route to be able to go from the northern part of Laverne to the northeast part of San Dimas, and it's constructed in the correct place. It's not subject to any washout, and it has storm drain system in it. We're planting trees. It has a sidewalk along one side. It's a little steeper than you might be used to, but it still is getting from here to here. It's just doing it in one swoop instead of hairpin turns. But we're pleased to get that project nearly finished.
And one of the things that and this always seems to work with Laverne, is that we've had great cooperation between San Dimas and Laverne on this, on funding of it and doing a lot of other things. Our relationships with some of the county agencies is a little more difficult. And that's why when we talk about it's been closed since 2010, and this is going to be open in 2018, a lot of time was spent on we had to get some property from one county agency for the right-of-way. We had to get their approvals on designs, and then there are other people. And then as you come along, you know, I don't know about any of you, but I really never thought nesting bats was a big problem. But it turned out in those trees that were being disturbed there are bats. And it turned out that we had to wait for their nesting season to end before we couldn't do any work there. So there are a lot of little things that really, when you say, why did it take so long? There are a lot of little things, like little bats.
Right. But we're finally there, just about. So I echo that. Laverne is a good partner
They have been for
in a lot of things.
a long time.
And I hope they feel the same way about us. But and I think this is an important road. We're pleased to get it done because not only does it help provide the emergency services for Laverne residents that live to the west, believe it or not, there are a few, but it also just gives us another route to get, San Dimas Canyon Road then can always be accessible, whether it's to get to the dam or to get up that way, even if the creek washes out San Dimas Canyon Road. So public safety wise, it's very important.
Well, I know one of the things we've been concerned about for years, because people have talked about this, essentially San Dimas Canyon Road was a very long cul-de-sac,
Right.
Ending up at the ranger station. Without Golden Hills Road there, you couldn't, if you had to evacuate a large part of our population lives up in that area, that road might have had a problem. Now we have two ways out.
Yeah. And we're
And
really
the same is true with Laverne, with people coming down. They have an alternative to Wheeler, so
right.
it was a road that was necessary. The old road was not possible to rebuild.
It's kind of like shoveling sand. You shovel it and then it just keeps
Slides right
so
on down.
you just have a perpetual job.
It kind of had the deal that the cliffside fell onto it at the same time the other side was falling down the next cliffs. So it was
Yeah, it's like
left to its own devices. It wouldn't even have been a walking path.
Mother Nature was going to claim that road one
Yes.
way or another. So we're pleased to give that report. You folks may have noticed we're already putting up some holiday decorations in the downtown. It's not that we're trying to commercialize the world, but it allows us to have enough time to get everything done. And so folks have noticed from the west side we started to put up those holiday decorations. But it's really because we're getting ready for the extravaganza. The holiday extravaganza is the first Saturday in December, which happens to be December 1st. So last year we put and established a holiday parade as part of that event. And so it was so successful last year. We're going to add some more things to it this year. So you can join us about 11:30 is when the parade starts. And then all the rest of the day, there'll be activities and entertainment all throughout the downtown area. Just with the stores are having activities, and in the downtown, the Walker House has Santa, and there'll be the snow. Will bring in some snow, like always happens, and so we hope folks will schedule that on their calendars.
Last year was just a phenomenal event. The number of people, I think, concentrating it and also having it start and run continuously until it ended was a real good thing.
Yeah.
And people had a good time. It was just real good.
So I hope you'll put that on your calendar and join us. It's an ongoing thing, so you can come in the middle or stay the whole time. But the parade starts at 11:30. You may want to come like 11:45 or so, but by the time the parade gets kind of moving down San Dimas Avenue. But we really hope you'll come. Everyone will come and enjoy this great activity. So.
And the merchants are having a contest, as they usually do, for their window decorations, and so come down and be a part of it. The people who came last year really had a good time.
So the other thing, I guess, as far as any kind of update on things, we can if anyone wants to know or remind us about something new in town, we're happy to do that. One of the things I thought we'd talked about it in a previous show was how we make our decisions on street repairs and at what point do we...
Before we get to that, there was one item I got an email on. It had to do with, somebody was inquiring about work being done and permitting construction work until midnight in the foothills. I'd not heard that we were doing that. Had you?
Well, there was, the whole background to that, we're not. And the reason why is because the subdivision, the homes that are being built in the foothills just above Pinnacle Peak on Cataract is a request. They need to get the water system in that project installed, and then the first layer of asphalt on the streets for them to be able to get a building permit to start building the homes. So they want to get the water tank finished as soon as possible. They asked the city if we would approve 2 or 3 shifts work, in other words, kind of work around the clock to get that water tank finished, so that the idea they could get it done sooner and then be able to have water, for their fire protection is what they need to get a building permit. So they made that request to the city, and the staff said, we understand your intent, but keep thinking, not this particular approach. And so we've notified them that the city has not approved nighttime work. It's kind of really further up the foothills.
I was going to say, it must be almost a mile from the...
It is, and that was their hope, that they could do it in a way that would be quiet, but it needs to be lit, and there'll still need to be vehicles going back and forth at odd hours of the night. And so we said, we understand your idea, but it could be just too disruptive. And so that's what the email was about, and it's those who are just adjacent to that project that had
Yeah,
the
I could
concern.
understand why they might have been concerned if they'd heard that might happen, but that is not
No,
going to happen.
and in fact, I did see that email, and we responded that it's not approved by the city. They're still subject to the same requirements on construction. They can't start before 7 a.m. and so forth, and can't work beyond dusk. So that's where all that came from.
Okay.
And we're glad to clarify that. In fact, whenever someone says, could you clarify, we're happy to do that, because most of the time people just assume that there's going to be nighttime work or some other thing. So it's always good to just call and check out and find out what the real situation was.
And that gives me an opportunity to put in a little commercial for, this is a unique service offered by Blaine that no other city manager offers. If you see something or hear a rumor about something like that and you want to find out about it, call Blaine's direct line in off business hours. You can call him during business hours too, but you can call during off business hours, leave a message of what it is you're concerned about, leave your telephone number or contact information so he can get back to you or have somebody else get back to you. This is a wonderful opportunity to communicate with the city. You don't have to know who you need to talk to. You just need to know that the information is going directly to Blaine, and he will be the person dealing with making sure somebody deals with it. That has worked very well for people who have taken advantage of it. And a lot of times people hear a rumor, they pass it on Facebook or Next Door Neighbor or whatever the various websites are, and it gets all blown out of proportion when a simple telephone call to Blaine, to his email, to his voicemail, you don't have to even talk to him, would solve the problem much easier. So his telephone number, it's the 909-394-6213. In the evening, if he is here, it goes directly to his desk. But if he's not, it goes to his voicemail. You can leave a voicemail. You can tell him who you are, the contact information, and it can be simply, if you've heard a rumor that you think doesn't make sense to you maybe, give Blaine a call. You will get, that's the best way to get information, make sure somebody will take care of it and do it, right?
Yes,
I mean, it's,
yes.
I don't know if Blaine, when he first volunteered to do this, I don't know if he, whether he really knew what he was doing, although people have not abused this by any means, but it is a way, you don't have to worry about who you need to contact. If you contact Blaine in that manner, it works.
You know, along those lines, a gentleman contacted me today and asked about street sweeping. He said he thought that it used to be that his day for street sweeping was on Thursday. And that was working out okay, but now he sees the sweeper on Monday, the day before trash day, or on Tuesday, the trash day. So he wanted to kind of find out what's going on. So when we have a new contractor for street sweeping, and the contractor is able to give us information on where street sweepers go all the time. You know, what routes they're on, how fast they're driving, how fast the broom is turning, and how much material is in the hopper as they sweep it up, which is all incredibly helpful for us. So that if someone says, I haven't seen a sweeper in my neighborhood for 6 months, then we can go and look and find out. And so if there's not been, then we will fix that. On the other hand, we're able to look up from this GPS system to find out, well, indeed, they were there on Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock in the morning, and their broom speed was fine, they weren't going too fast, or they were going too fast, or they missed you, or this is what they did. So this gentleman, and I really appreciate him calling and contacting because he cares about his neighborhood. And he says there's been some times when people don't put their trash cans away like they should. Or sometimes they'll park their vehicle on their front lawn. And we can do better than that in our neighborhood. So he was asking for the city to be of support to go and take a look at the area. And so our code enforcement people will go into that neighborhood and we'll take a look at both of those things and make sure that people are following through. And then John Campbell and our public works staff is going to take a look at the street sweeping and to work all that out. So, but I do want to let folks know that normally the trash comes once a week on Tuesdays. We sweep the streets nearly every day. We couldn't sweep the entire town on Wednesday morning after trash day. So there may be times when you will see a sweeper at various times or days of the week that may not always be either just before or just after trash day. And so we do try and mix it up a little bit so that we can sweep the streets at different times to be able to have less traffic or to deal with whatever, or we just come back and do it after if there's a construction project or something. So, but our goal is to sweep every street residentially twice a month. And then some commercial areas, it's more frequently. All of the arterial streets, the more traveled streets, we sweep more frequently. And so we have a system set up. And so if you have a question about sweeping in your neighborhood, we're going to have the answer. So before we would just say, well, did you do that route like we asked you? But now we have the GPS system to be able to help us get that information. So we appreciate calls like that and to have those and have the ability to answer those kind of questions.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes or maybe about 4 or 5. And we thought we would try to go through once more with you how the city systematically plans and takes care of rebuilding roads, slurry sealing, and all the things that we do. You don't have a whole lot of time, Blaine, but I know you can explain it without any problem.
You know, building roads, I've learned more than I ever thought I would about building roads. The underground soil, the soil conditions, the sub-base, all those things are real critical to be able to have a long-standing road. I've also learned with respect to, sometimes we look at the road from the top and that's how we make our decision about whether or not it should be, what kind of, it needs maintenance or it needs to be replaced. Not always do we need to replace the entire street. Sometimes we can put a layer of slurry on it. And we've been experimenting with different kinds of slurry that last a little longer. In a way, it's kind of like putting oils back into the street so that it doesn't dry out. like putting lotion on it, I guess is one way to look at it. And so we use a pavement index to be able to evaluate the streets. So not just taking a look at them, how they appear, but actually they will drill a core to find out how deep the street is, what its composition is like, and also they can evaluate the asphalt quality over time, because asphalt, like a number of things exposed to sunlight, it breaks down. And so we're able to evaluate the condition of the asphalt and the quality of the road and the depth that allows engineers to then calculate what the lifespan of that road or that asphalt, or they will give it actually what's called a rating to be able to rate as far as how much longer it will last before it needs certain kinds of maintenance. And then, for example, if a road has a 90 rating, then what that means is that structurally it's very sound, and if it does need maintenance, then it's probably a slurry. On the other hand, if the rating is like a 60, it means that the stability of the road is severely compromised, and it's time to almost build a new road, to remove some of what's there and rebuild it to bring that index back up. So generally around 70 or 75 is the rating you want to be at, or at least that indicates that your roads are in good condition. So I think 70, 75 or above is good. Anything below that, you'll need to monitor. So when we have these ratings, then it allows us to take the money we have available and spend it in the place where it needs to be spent most. For example, we want to rebuild a 60 level street more than we want to build an 85 and put another slurry on. So it allows us to then prioritize what we maintain and what kinds of maintenance we do on that road so we can get the most bang for the buck. Now, sometimes you will see surface cracks in a road. Most of the time, they are cosmetic. It doesn't mean that the underlying street is deteriorated. It may mean a little bit of movement in the soil underneath, but if they're just surface cracks and they're not, widening to a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, of course we never let them get that far. And so, or sometimes the surface part of the street appears to kind of flake off. That doesn't mean that the entire street needs to be replaced. That could be a slurry candidate. On the other hand, some slurries we're using now have a more fibrous material than what we used, say, even 7 years ago. So some of our slurries don't flake off like they used to. So, but I just want folks to know there's a science to it, and we try and follow this pattern and process so that we can use the money wisely, because we could make a street look pretty when we've got a street that really needs to be reconstructed. So.
Well, I think that has served San Dimas very well for quite a while. I go through some cities, and I wouldn't think of mentioning any names, but I think their streets are about a 10.
Right.
That and I think they're at the point. There's nothing you can do except rebuild them, and that's a big expense.
Right.
And
right.
You don't always get to that. Well, anything else? I don't know if I haven't seen the signal that our time is up, but it's got to be close.
Over your shoulder, you said about 30 seconds or 20 seconds. So.
Well, thank you very much for watching tonight. We hope the program has been entertaining. We hope you'll also be thinking of questions you'll be able to ask us in the future, or send an email to Blaine, or leave a voicemail and tell him what you'd like for us to talk about, and we'll be happy to do that. Thank you. Blaine?
And happy Thanksgiving.
And happy Thanksgiving.